time. I'm so slow with this shit.
Is it me? Am I out of touch? No, it's the children.
Am I the drama? Is Kate the drama?
Are we the drama?
Hi, Kate.
Hi, Dom. You little snuggy buggy ruggy. How are you?
Call me the purple rain of the Smurf family.
Ooh, so like Prince,
Prince.
the artist formerly known as Prince, the Purple Rain of Smurfville.
For those that can't see,
yeah.
I'm wearing a purple doona.
How do I do a Prince impersonation? But the first 6 things that ran through my mind would just not. No. That's not Michael Jackson. See, that ran through my head, but I didn't do it. I'm glad you did.
The fact that I could hit that note is
that's great.
golden.
I think it's because you are sick is why you can hit those notes.
Oh yeah. Yeah. She's so sick and German.
Well, for our listeners, we've both been under the weather. I've had COVID for a second time, which is it's different symptoms every day. It's just a treat. But I'm feeling much better today, so that's nice. And Dom, talk us a little bit through your last few days.
I'm just losing complete bodily function.
I'm just losing control, losing my mind.
To be perfectly honest, it's not that very different from most daily life for me. But
well, that's right.
At least I'm doing it on someone's Airbnb floor, bed, sheets, bathroom. So I'm okay. I do feel for you, Kate. Having COVID shouldn't be a laughing matter. Australia's going through what it sounds like is another wave. So I think you're like the 10th friend or family that I know that's gotten sick again.
Yeah.
So when can it just be over?
I know. Tell me about it. One thing, though, is that I'm glad to be here talking to another human being, albeit remotely, because I haven't really spoken to anybody in 4 days. And you guys you probably know me a little bit now. I like to talk. I like to communicate. I like to bounce ideas off people. Being alone in my own mind we should just do a whole episode on that, talk about being afraid of things. It's not great for me. So I'm looking forward to seeing all of my family there. And I'm excited to be here to tell you this story. I did a lot of research into this one today, so I'm excited to share it with you all. But do we have any housekeeping?
We absolutely do have some housekeeping. I don't know where to begin.
It's up to
you. Maybe we'll just start with the usual.
Yeah, okay, that sounds like a plan. Do we have any podcasts that we want to shout out today?
I was actually just thinking that, and I'm like, fuck, I didn't prepare one. So do you know what? Okay. Fuck it. We're just gonna do it ourselves.
And it's got nothing to do with anything that we ever do, but one I listened to today. And it's called Literally, and it's by a person, you might not know him. His name's Rob Lowe, and he does it, and it's funny, and it's great, and he talks to people. But I'm finding the more episodes I listen to, he kind of tells the same story every episode, so I feel like I know Rob Lowe really well now, which is good for me.
I love that he's sort of built into his podcast the fact that most people are only going to listen to one episode. So he's like, I'll just tell the same story.
Same story. Exactly right. Yeah. Every person he interviews. But no, it's very funny. And it's just he just talks to lots of celebrities. It's good.
Oh, fair enough. Well, sadly, literally, the podcast is not part of the Boo Pod network, but it should be.
Sure. Rob, if you're listening, reach out.
Apart from that, I don't think we don't have any other regular housekeeping.
Okay, cool.
It's the usual, like, go check out our Patreon. We really appreciate and love all of our fans, and we thank you for listening. But also, if you feel generous enough to give us $1 or $2 a month towards keeping the lights on or keeping the medical bills paid for Kate and I.
This is more important.
We are both about to begin a mental plan with our local GPs.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, in that case, why don't I get into some of our etymology for today?
Yeah.
I love looking up words. It's my new favorite hobby, is each of the phobias that I look up. I like to tell you all a little bit about it. So my last episode that I did was about being lost in the desert. And it got me on a bit of a rabbit hole of people being lost in places. And another place that people tend to get lost is the snow. So I've done an episode today called Lost in the Snow.
I have definitely gotten lost in the snow 1 or 2 nights. So,
well, there you go. Actually, there's a story here, if I've got time for it, which, it could very well be something that you've experienced or gotten to. Who knows? But let me jump into it. We've successfully gone 6 minutes without starting the episode. So I'm getting into it now. Okay, so lost in the snow. Here's a couple of fears for you. I'm going to throw them at you. The fear of cold. So there's a few different ones. The fear of cold is number one. So if you're scared of the cold, it's called cryophobia. So that's, cryogenics, all of that sort of stuff. Cryo comes from the Greek word kryos, which means cold or frigid. And then phobos is fear. So cryophobia. It's often worse during winter months. Believe it or not, it's not as bad during the summer. And so, some people are afraid of cold air temperatures while others fear touching cold objects. Cryophobia may stem from many different root causes, but it's most often linked to a subjective perception of cold and negative associations with the sensation of cold. However, each person experiences temperatures differently, so the threshold for cold is different for everyone. So that's cryophobia.
Have you ever met someone that's actually afraid of the cold? Like, I don't like the cold, obviously. Look at me, but I don't know. I don't know.
I've
anyone
not
that's
met anyone who's a cryophobe. No, I haven't. But, I've never asked. So maybe I have, and then I've just never asked them. But, I can't imagine during the winter they're out very often. So we probably would be exposed to them going, God, I have a phobia of this. Why am I standing outside in the snow? What an idiot. All right. The next phobia I want to share with you is the fear of snow. Now, this one's a little bit more specific. It is called, it's how I would read it is chionophobia, but it's a Greek word, so I'm saying that incorrectly. So
chionophobia.
Chionophobia. It comes from the Greek word for snow, which is like chioni. Chioni.
Oh, okay.
Or I think like the k sound is actually silent, so it's like chioni. So there you go. And that's often linked to other phobias, which those with a fear of cold, severe weather, or water might be afraid of snowstorms, even when they're at home. People with fears of driving, being trapped, or becoming contaminated are typically afraid only when they have to go out in the snow. And the fear ranges from mild to severe, may be extremely life-limiting for those who live in colder climates. Yes, you would think that. I agree.
True.
Now,
hey, just in case you were wondering, I think you definitely have some potential of being like a phone sex worker, but speaking in a Greek accent. It's so good.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, I'll put that on my list of jobs that I can do.
Yeah, just look, it's a logical thing that
she
flows
was
on so
a high school
naturally.
teacher, but it didn't work out so well. So she became a phone sex worker, but specifically with a Greek accent, even though she is like white European all the way through generations. Okay, finally, the third fear, and I really like this one, is it was tied into the ones I was looking at. It's a fear of the northern lights. It's called auroraphobia.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And it derives from the Latin word aurora, meaning dawn, or the goddess of the dawn, named after her. And borealis, which is derived from the Latin word for north or northern or north wind. It's an unusual, but it's a very real phobia. The fear is generally based on a larger phobia of astronomical phenomena. Astronomy and astrology have been heavily linked throughout history, and some astronomical fears are based on religious or doomsday phobias. In other cases, these fears are rooted in a generalized fear of the unknown.
Wow.
So those are 3 phobias that I found to share with you all today.
Phobias.
Phobias.
I'm so fascinated that there's such specific phobias for these, rare
Yeah, all
things.
pretty much anything. You can almost have a phobia about anything, and I like finding out what they are and then sharing the etymology with you all, often Greek or Latin, sometimes Roman, but mostly Greek or Latin.
Can anyone tell Kate hasn't taught in like 4 or 5 days? She's like, Dom, did you know
I
this?
need to share my education with you.
5 times
Listen to
5
me.
is 35. Let's do our
Do you know
times
what?
tables.
Yeah. No, I'm afraid I have a phobia of times tables. There you go.
There we
Phobia
go.
of mathematics. I'll do that next time. All right. So now I've shared some phobias with you. I want to tell you a couple of stories of people who have had some time in the snow or in very cold environments. So maybe not specifically snow, but I found a couple of historic stories that I wanted to share with you. The first one I thought was just really cool because of what this person did, and then the one after that, it's there's a lot more detail. So let me tell you this first one. So in 1912, an Australian geologist, shout out, and explorer Douglas Mawson set off with 2 companions, dog handler Belgrave Ninnis and world champion skier Xavier Mertz, to explore an uncharted area of Antarctica. So 1912. So we're going back a little ways. Now, it proved to be slow going with Antarctic storms hindering the progress, but they'd still managed to get 1,200 miles out from base when disaster struck. Out of nowhere, a massive crevice opened up underneath the party, swallowing up the sledge carrying most of the food, 6 of the strongest dogs, and Ninnis. So one of their party fell down this crevice. The remaining pair apparently spotted 2 injured dogs on a ledge 165 feet below them, but Ninnis, there was no sign of him. With only a week's supply of food remaining and a 5-week journey back to base, Mawson and Mertz decided to turn back right away, shooting the weakest dogs for meat as they went. I do not condone, but at the same time, I understand in the sense of them needing to survive. However, little did they know, and here's a fun tip for you, little did they know that huskies' livers contain toxic levels of vitamin A, which slowly poisons you, and it poisoned these 2 guys, and it causes strips of your skin to fall off.
What the motherfuck?
Right? So don't eat huskies' livers. That's your tip for today. If there's one thing you take away from this podcast, do not eat husky livers. Now, Mertz began to go mad because of the vitamin A levels. He was trying to bite off his own fingers during their travels, and he tried to destroy their tent. So he's not having a good time. 3 weeks after Ninnis' accident, not Ninnis, the other guy, Mertz, he died of starvation and exposure and vitamin A poisoning. So that's bad. Mawson, however, stumbled on alone. His physical condition, this is so great, and partly why I wanted to add this into the story. His physical condition was now so bad that, according to America's PBS News, every morning before he rose, he had to reattach the soles of his feet, which became separated from the overlying flesh.
Oh my goodness, Kate.
Yeah.
I'm picturing that, and I don't know if that special cream that you use would have done the trick.
Magic cream. Does he just tuck them into his socks? Like, how do you just reattach the soles of your feet? Like, I don't know. Anyway, Mawson was determined to return the data and the specimens that they'd collected. So he's still like, no, I'm a geologist, I'm an adventurer, I've got to get this stuff back to base. So he's trying on his own, popping his feet back on, and his survival, he survived. His survival is a testimony to his courage, physical strength, and psychological resilience. He struggled for 30 days, eventually reaching the base, only to miss the ship retrieving the men by 6 hours. So he got back to the base and was like, I'm going to pop on the ship, we'll get home, get my feet done. He misses the boat by 6 hours.
Get a nice Betty Petty.
Get a Betty. Now, instead of returning on the Aurora, which was the name of the ship, 6 men who had volunteered to search for the party, they met with Mawson. So they were like, hey, we didn't go back. We stayed to look for you and you turned up. This is great. Great news. So the small group, they were waiting, but they had to wait a little time for the boat to return because obviously that trip from the Antarctic back to Australia takes a bit of time. So they were just hanging out in the snow for another 10 months.
Jesus.
So it's just a quick little 10-month.
How does someone whose skin is falling off them just
hang out for 10 months?
I'm just picturing Death Becomes Her. They're just, it's just some spray paint.
Plugging the things back on.
Some spackle. We'll just sew your soles back on, Dal.
Yeah, don't worry about it, Dal. You'll be right. So they waited for 10 months. Then they did get picked up and he survived. And he was amazing. This is what I loved because I found this little other bit of information. But Douglas Mawson's expedition was the first trip and the first time that an Antarctic radio link was set up. So they took all of the equipment to Antarctica to set up a radio link with Tasmania, and it worked. It was still really new technology, but they, used a transmitter, and then it was operated using long wave and Morse code telegraphy. Yeah.
I was about to say, there's the boat there on the land. They're like, radio would be such a great idea right now.
That'd be great. But that was the first time, and it was an Aussie guy. I love that. I really enjoyed reading that, learning a new fact about, Douglas Mawson. What a legend.
Okay, listeners, what you should take from this is that Australians are no joke. We get shit done.
We do.
Feet or no feet, okay?
We don't need feet to do the work. That's what we're saying.
I will walk 500 miles.
And I will walk 500 more just to set up a telegraph station in Antarctica.
Just to be the man without soles on his feet.
So that was a pretty impressive, 30-day struggle and then another 10 months for Douglas Mawson to survive living in those conditions and then to make it back and to continue on with some of his amazing, technological advancements and finds and geological, things. That's really cool. So love a little Aussie story to start us off with. But
as long as they don't serve him some husky hot dogs or something as soon as he gets
husky
back.
livers. I'm a pass on the husky livers. Thank you so much for asking. Now, this next story, there's a bit to it, and I cut it back a long way. So if you want to read any more, in-depth detail on this story, you can certainly look it up. It's an amazing story, and I was just caught up on it. So I have cut it down a bit to share with everyone here, but this is the story of Ernest Shackleton and the ship Endurance. Ironic.
Oh, what a story.
It's unbelievable. So to share with our listeners, on August 8th in 1913, the Endurance ship sailed for the Antarctic via Buenos Aires and the sub-Antarctic island of South Georgia, where there was a Norwegian whaling station. On the November 5th, 1914, they arrived. Oh, I said 13 before, it's 14. Anyway, they arrived at South Georgia. Shackleton learnt much from the whaling captains about the conditions between there and the Weddell Sea, which indicated that this was a particularly heavy ice year. The plan had been to spend only a few days collecting stores, but instead the Endurance remained at South Georgia for a month to allow the ice further south to disperse. The month was one where bonds of friendship and mutual respect were formed between the Endurance crew and the Norwegian whalers. Bonds that would prove unexpectedly useful sometimes later to Shackleton and his men. So with this particular trip, I've saved a picture of the journey, which we'll share on our socials. And during this time, so 1914, when Ernest packed up the ship, and all of the guys that were coming with him and the materials and things, they had heard that the war was getting started. Basically, they were rallying all the troops. So he called back home and was like, if you want their ships or if you want us to come back, then we will. Like, this expedition is pretty, amazing, and I won't get another chance to do it, but it's the war. So if you want me to come back, I will. But then Winston Churchill called him and was like, nah, you're good. Go on your trip. It's going to be fantastic. You're right. We'll take care of the war. You just go on.
You booked your annual leave, hun. You deserve to. You need a break.
You deserve it. You deserve a time out. So that was in the morning of that day, and that night World War I started. So it was one of those things. Wait, that's right, isn't it? Yeah, that's right. World War I. I get confused between my wars. A historian, I am not. Okay, so Ernest has packed up all his stuff. They've gone to South Georgia, made friends with these Norwegian whaling station people, stayed there for a month, waiting for the ice to, melt a bit so that they don't get their ship stuck.
Yeah, now, for all those Gen Zs out there, our world was once covered in ice, and due to a lot of tomfoolery, the world is really
great way to put it.
The world's getting warm.
It is. Okay, now the Weddell Sea was known to be particularly icebound at the best of times, and the Endurance left with a deck load of coal in addition to normal stores to help with the extra load on the engines when it came to pushing through the pack ice in the sea. Extra clothing and stores were taken from South Georgia in the event that the Endurance may have to winter in the ice if caught in the Weddell Sea as it froze, unable to reach the continent first. They left South Georgia on the 5th of December, 1914. The Endurance battled her way through 1,000 miles of pack ice over a 6-week period and was 100 miles or 1 day's sail from the destination when on the 18th of January in 1915, the ice closed in around the ship. The temperature dropped dramatically, cementing together the loose ice that surrounded the ship. On the one hand, it wasn't totally unexpected, so they had planned for this, or they thought that this could happen. It had happened to ships in the Arctic and the Antarctic many times. However, it was a significant setback for Shackleton. The disappointment would have been bitter. He was 40 years old, his country was at war, and the expedition had taken huge amounts of effort and energy to prepare, and he was unlikely to ever have this opportunity again. The ship was drifting to the southwest with the ice. Attempts were made to free the ship when sometimes cracks would appear in the ice nearby, but no avail. The ice around the ship itself was thick and solid. Men with heavy improvised ice chisels and iron bars breaking up the ice near the ship, and then the ship was at full speed, had no effect at all. So they just continued to drift with the ice. By the end of February, it boggles my brain the time that they spend doing this stuff. Back in, the early 1900s, like this is crazy. By the end of February, temperatures had fallen and were regularly at negative 20 degrees Celsius. The ship was now clearly frozen in for the winter. So imagine that. You're like, we're working really hard through January, and then it's February, and they go, oh, well, it's winter time now, so we'll just have to wait until spring.
I know, and we talk about being locked in for COVID or, 5 days not speaking to anyone. I guess they had each other. And I mean, you could try and get the whole crew to all piss on the ice all at the same time. That might...
But it was pretty thick. I don't think they were getting through it with their little wheeze, but, Look, now the problem was because they're frozen in for the winter, their worry was that the drifting ice is just going to, float them wherever and somewhere where it would be impossible to break out of during the spring. So they could have been going to a colder place where they were just trapped for forever.
Yeah, I think people forget that it's once you're stuck in the ice, it doesn't mean that you're not moving.
Yeah, that's right.
All of that is shifting and changing, and you could travel just as far.
Yeah,
but anyway.
Exactly. No, exactly right. The sides of the ship were cleared so that if the ice began to press together, then hopefully the Endurance would be able to rise above the ice and ride on it rather than being crushed by it. Mm-hmm. So that's something else to remember. This ice is closing in, and it will just keep going regardless of things being in its way. If it can move the things, it will. So everybody on the ship knew that either one of two things is going to happen. Either the pack ice would thaw and break up and disperse in the spring, so the ship would be freed, or it would consolidate, and driven by the effects of wind and tide over hundreds of miles, it would take hold of the ship and crush it like a toy in a vice. Now, they were sort of keeping an eye on this. They're like, which way is this going to go? And unfortunately, the first real damage was to the stern post, which twisted with the planking buckling in the same area, and she sprung a leak. The bilge pumps were started, and the leak was initially kept in check. On October 27th, so they were stuck in Feb, and now it's October. So a bit of time's passed. Shackleton had a journal that he kept, which they were able to recover. There are also other archive items that they were able to get. I'll go into a little bit more detail later. But Shackleton wrote on October 27th that the position was last latitude, longitude. The temperature was negative 8.5 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's like negative 30 Celsius. It's crazy. A gentle southerly breeze was blowing, and the sun shone in a clear sky. After long months of ceaseless anxiety and strain, after times when hope beat high and times when the outlook was black indeed, we have been compelled to abandon the ship, which is crushed beyond all hope of ever being righted. We are alive and well, and we have stores and equipment for the task that lie before us. The task is to reach land with all the members of the expedition. It's hard to write what I feel. So after that time, they were sort of waiting for one option or the other. So from February to October, they're like, it will either melt the ice or it'll crush our ship. And crush its ship it did. I have saved some pictures, which you need to go to our socials and look at. And you can look, it looks as though there's just a bit of driftwood on the ice by the final kind of stages.
Oh,
it
wow.
Absolutely destroyed this ship. The ice just completely covers it over. There's like a few bits of timber and things like that, but it ate the ship.
Yeah, it's like Pac-Man. Chop,
exactly.
chop, 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 chop.
Precisely. Now, the Endurance had drifted at least 1,186 miles before, since first becoming fast in the ice, 281 days previously. She was 346 miles from Paulet Island, the nearest point where there was any possibility of finding food and shelter. The Endurance finally broke up and sank below the ice and the waters of the Weddell Sea on November 21st, 1915. The men had saved as many supplies as they could before she disappeared. So the boat was literally gone. When I was reading this, I was like, I have never thought about that in the extreme sense of the ice, like taking your ship and crushing it and burying it. Wild. The 28 men of the expedition were now isolated on the drifting pack ice hundreds of miles from land with no ship, no means of communication with the outside world, and limited supplies. What was worse was the ice itself was now starting to break up as the Antarctic spring got underway. On December 20th, Shackleton decided that the time had come to abandon their camp and march westward to where they thought the nearest land was at Paulet Island. They had 3 lifeboats named after patrons of the expedition who donated these funds. They were now man-hauled in, these boats, they were now man-hauled in relays. So they had the James Caird, the Dudley Docker, and the Stancomb Wills. Those are the 3, lifeboats that they were carrying around with them whilst they're hiking on the breaking up snow ice stuff.
And here comes Mertz wandering along with no feet. Hey, boys,
Get
there's a radio back there.
Actually, it's around the same time, so it's like, I wonder where. I mean, the Antarctic is reasonably big. I think it's like a suburb, but so I feel like they could be in different spots. But now these 28 humans were all forced into the boats by the thinning ice, which became increasingly fragile on April 9th, 1916. And they made their way across a stretch of open water. By the evening, they were once again able to haul the boats onto a large ice floe and pitch their tents. So they left the boat, the ship, the Endurance, in December and started walking across the ice to try to get to land. It's now April. January, February, March. That's like 5 months of walking on ice to try and find land. Like, it's so long. Like, a week is a long time. They're spending months doing the same thing.
Well, no, that's like 14 months since they first actually left or whatever.
Correct.
As well.
Yeah, that's right. Gosh, imagine trying to explain that to the missus. Like, I swear my boat got stuck in the ice and then it sunk. It's almost like the Blues Brothers when he's like with Carrie Fisher under the tunnel. Okay. Now, the whole group were kept together in the monotonous and strenuous task of pulling laden lifeboats across broken up, ridged ice floes. It was now 14 months since the Endurance had become frozen in the ice and nearly 5 months since she'd sunk, marooning them in featureless, icy wilderness. On April 12th, Shackleton found that instead of making good progress westward, they had actually travelled 30 miles to the east because of the drifting ice. But the good news about this is Paulet Island, off the Kentucky tour, guys. Off we go to Elephant Island. So they
Yay.
found this other spot. They made landfall and they were ecstatic to do so. It had been 497 days since they last set foot on land. So Elephant Island looks great this time of year.
Yeah.
Now, for the time being, they were more safe and secure than they had been for a long time, but they were still stranded far from civilization with no one knowing where they were or what condition they were in. There was no chance of a rescue. Shackleton realized that in order to effect a rescue, he was going to have to travel to the nearest inhabited place, which was the whaling station back in South Georgia. And that was 800 miles across the most stormy stretch of ocean in the world. So it's not just a little row across the lake. This is some of the most intense, stormy, hectic ocean on the planet. And it's 800 miles of that to get anywhere where there's a person.
And what, he's going to do it in a little dinghy?
Well, we'll see. They expected to encounter waves that were 50 feet from tip to trough. Cape Horn rollers is what they called them. And they were going to take a 22-foot longboat. So it's not exactly a dinghy, but it's certainly not something you want to be going into the most stormy, hectic sea in the world. Now, their navigation was by sextant. Now, that is an instrument, for those of you who might not know, I had to look it up, but it's an instrument for determining the angle between the horizon and a celestial body, such as the sun or the moon or a star. And they use it to navigate and determine latitude and longitude. It's really cool. You would know what it is by just looking at a picture of one. Now, they were dependent on sightings of the sun that could sometimes not be seen for weeks because it was overcast. So this sounds like a great time. So like 22-foot longboat, 800 miles through the most dangerous sea on the planet, 50-foot waves. We've got a sextant. We've got, some music. I don't know what we've got. It doesn't really sound like we have a lot, but why don't we give it a crack? That's the thinking.
I was about to say, whoever was in charge of like stocking and preparing all the food and the things that they needed to survive, like whoever's job that was, they should get a bloody raise, because clearly this trip has gone a little bit longer than expected, and they've still got food. They've still okay. got the skin on the bottom of their feet. They're ready to go.
That's a bonus. Always a bonus. Now, everybody was saying too through this whole time that Shackleton was just a bit of a legend. He just kept morale up. He kept everybody sane. He kept people moving. There's still 27 other guys that he's looking out for, and he knows it's his expedition. He knows that this is, not his fault, but it's definitely, he got them there. So he's going to try and get them out. Now, one of the, lifeboats that they had, the James Caird, it set off on April 24th, 1916. That was the very last day before the pack ice closed in again around Elephant Island. So they were fortunate enough to get out. The crew of their, rescue mission was Shackleton, Worsley, Crean, McNeish, McCarthy, and Vincent. So they took a few, left the rest at Elephant Island. The anticipated journey time was a month. In a 22-foot
what's a month? What's a month?
Forget it. What? It's fine. That's like a spot on the map. Nobody minds. And it was to become one of the most astonishing small boat journeys of all time. The James Caird made progress at the rate of around 60 to 70 miles a day through rough sea conditions. So they need to go 800 miles. So they're nearly clocking it at 70 miles a day in rough sea, which is pretty good.
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah. On May 5th, the 11th day out at sea, the sea became much rougher. Shackleton wrote in his journal, "I called to the other men that the sky was clearing. And then a moment later, I realized that what I had seen was not a rift in the clouds, but the white crest of an enormous wave. During 26 years of experience in the ocean in all of its moods, I had never encountered a wave so gigantic."
This man and his journaling.
Imagine he's like, "Guys, it's clearing up." Oh, that's a wave. Hang on, best pop it in my journal.
Hold on.
Just give me a minute.
Dear diary. Holy fuck.
Good golly, Miss Molly. There's a wave heading our way. Better go, XOXO, Shackleton.
P.S. I'm a bit wet.
Oh, my goodness. Now, on the morning of the 8th of May, so on the 5th of May, they saw the giant wave. Guess what? They survived it. And on the morning of the 8th of May, they began to see kelp floating in the sea. Then they saw some seabirds. And just after noon, they caught a glimpse of South Georgia. Only 14 days after leaving Elephant Island, it took about half as long as they thought it would take. But despite being so close and they were running out of fresh water to drink, they had no choice but to wait for the next morning to break before attempting to land on the shore because of a rocky reef that was preventing them from getting the boat on the shore. So after a couple of days, so they're sitting there in the ocean. Yeah.
I'm just thinking, you know, when you hear old people just say, oh, the young generations are just not made of sterner stuff, you know.
Yeah.
You're so soft. I always just scoff at that stuff and go, yeah, you don't know nothing. But after this story, I'm like, okay, I'm piss weak. I'm a little softy.
There's no way that I would just be like, oh, guys, you know, we've after 2 weeks on the ocean and we nearly died heaps of times. There's the land, but we can't land safely. So everyone's going to wait in the boat until it's safe, and then we'll try again. Now, after a couple of days, the seas, this is so wild to me. The seas got really rough again and like blew them 30 more miles away from the shore.
Of course.
So now they're like, piss, we got to get back again. After they managed to find their way back, they were finally able to dock at South Georgia. Yay. Now, they docked, but the whaling spot that they were looking for, so all the people that they knew, that was still another 22 miles away from where they landed their boat.
Of course it was.
Of course it was. And in order to get there, they had to go across the backbone of mountains that ran the entire length of South Georgia. Now, that sounds bad enough. And they had all of their maps and stuff with them. But this is a journey that no one had ever managed. The map depicted the area as blank. So no one had even done this to be a cartographer, to draw this, because they're like, nah, fuck it. We'll just leave it blank. Who's going to ask? Who's ever going to be here? Don't worry about it.
Google Maps says to go round.
Yep,
so
we're going round. Everybody back on the boat. Now, on May 15th, Shackleton, Crean, and Worsley, so three of the crew, they set out to cross the mountains and reach the whaling station. So they left the other guys back with the rescue boat, which I think is quite a good idea, to be honest, because you're like, well, they stay with the boat. If anything happens to us, then they've got a way out, or I don't know. So, yeah, I mean, Shackleton was trying to work it out the best he could. So they set out across the mountains to reach the whaling station. They climb over the mountains. They stop themselves from freezing to death. And then they could finally see the whaling station. They're like, hey, it's down there. There's the whaling station. We've walked all this way and we've climbed all these mountains. The only way to get down to the whaling station, by the scenes of it, is to go down a frickin' waterfall. And that's the only way we can get there.
I was just about to say, what bloody necks.
Oh, so they had to traverse down the side of this really dangerous and tall waterfall to try to get to the whaling station. So they managed to safely traverse down there. Who knows how long that took. And then they finally get there. They arrived at like 6:30. And then Shackleton said, where are all the people? And Worsley was like, wait till 7. People will turn up for work at 7. So sure enough, half an hour later, there was a bell that rang and all these people started turning up. But Shackleton, Crean, and Worsley, they'd been, they haven't had an opportunity to go to the spa or the hairdresser or have a shower over the past bit of time. So they looked pretty scary. So they would go up to people to ask for help or be like, hey, we're, looking for some people to help us out. And people would just flat out run away from them. They were like, nah, I don't know who you are. What? They'd just run off. They scared children. They were just, trying to figure out what was the best way to like communicate with someone. When they finally, reached South Georgia and got to the whaling station past there, they met some of the people that they had become really close to the year before.
Yeah.
So they finally got a chance to talk to them. And then they started to put together the plans for a rescue mission. So on May 23rd, 1916, they had their first rescue attempt. So Shackleton set out on the Southern Sky, which was a whaling boat, and they were heading out to Elephant Island. And then they were turned back because of sea ice, and that wasn't, ideal. And then they go, north to arrive at the Falkland Islands on the 31st of May. So they left on the 23rd, then arrived at a new place on the 31st. Now, on June 10th, so 10 days-ish later, 1916, there was a second rescue attempt, and this was on a trawler. It was loaned and provisioned by the Uruguayan government, but they again got turned back by ice. So they gave it a crack, but it didn't work out. Then they had to wait a little bit longer. So July 12th, so a month later, there was a third rescue attempt by a schooner Emma, and it was chartered and provisioned by donations raised at Punta Arenas in Chile, also to be turned back by ice. So all these people had worked really hard to try to help them. They'd raised money, just the community and the way that they were determined to save these people, which this is months gone by now. He arrives in May. It's now the end of July.
Yeah.
So they're like, well, this is not working out as well as we would have hoped. On August 25th, 1916, there was a fourth rescue attempt by the steam tug Yelcho, which was loaned by the Chilean government. On August 30th of 1916, they saw Elephant Island. So it's been a little ways of time. They got on a steam chug and they have arrived on the 30th of August. The boat soon approached close enough for Shackleton, who was standing at the bow, to shout to Wild, who was another one of the guys that had left. They'd left on Elephant Island. "Are you all well?" And Wild replied, "All safe, all well." And the boss replied, "Thank God." Now, one of the kids that was left at Elephant Island, now he wasn't working with the expedition, but he was very young. He was 14 years old. His name was Blackburrow. Surname, I would assume. Now, he had gotten frostbite during the months that they'd spent on this time, and unfortunately had to have a couple of toes amputated by some of the surgeons that were also there. But even though that had happened during that time and he couldn't walk, when the boat arrived, he was carried to a high rock and then he was propped up in his sleeping bag so that he could see what was going on, see the ship coming to take them home, see them save them. It was super cute. Now, Frank Wild invited Shackleton ashore to see how they lived on the island, but Shackleton was like, "I'm okay. Do we want to maybe just quickly get on this boat so that we don't get iced in again?"
Ready to go home.
Frank's like, "You've got to see what we've done with the dining area. It's just delightful. We made some ice for chairs and we've got an ice dining table." Now, Shackleton's like, "Nah, we're good." So within an hour, they were headed north to the world from which no news had ever been heard since October 1914. The crew that was left on Elephant Island had survived there for 137 days. It was 128 days since Shackleton had left for South Georgia with his small crew on the James Caird. Not a single man of Shackleton's original 28 was lost. And though the Endurance was lost at sea, the James Caird was brought back to England and it survives to this day at Dulwich College in London.
Holy moly.
Ernest, you absolute legend.
Do you know
he
what?
Did it.
It is so refreshing, Kate, to hear of a story like this. Because, how many stories have we done where people turn to absolute barbarism?
Yeah.
They go into murder mode or survival mode, or they kill one another, or they lose hope. We can't judge because here's you and I sitting all comfy and warm in our homes and our lovely privileged lives. But my goodness, it is really refreshing to hear a story of such determination care and kindness and whatever. I'm sure they had some low points. I'm sure they had some arguments. I'm sure some people lost the plot a little bit. Don't know how their mental health and well-being is.
They might also need to go to the GP for a mental health plan after that.
I think
whole
so.
thing. But it was amazing. I read the whole story, and that is a very, there was so much more that happened and so much more detail that is included on a really great website, which I do not have in front of me right now. But if you just search up Ernest Shackleton, it'll be one of the first that pops up. Now, one of the things which I didn't mention, I have likely cut it out of my story, was that they had a photographer on board. And when they left the ship, they saved all of his photographs. So they are, pictures from the time, pictures from those days, pictures of the ship and its decay in the ice, pictures of all the men who were there. It's pretty incredible. It's a pretty amazing piece of history, and I really enjoyed reading the story. So if you want to hear more about it, you can definitely look up. I'm sure there's other podcasts that have done it, but I thought it was just amazing because we do tend to find those stories which are pretty, hectic or that turn to sad things. But yeah, that one was a good one. I have one more though. I've got one more. And this one was a little more, not weird, but I'll tell you about it. It's definitely off the beaten track. It's more of a modern times. This could be something you could find yourself in the situation of, Dom. So let me get through it. It is what I titled The Frozen Lady. Jean Hillard was found in a friend's driveway, literally frozen stiff like a piece of meat out of the deep freeze. She had spent a night outside in minus 30 degrees Celsius weather, and her skin and muscles were frozen solid like an icicle. Doctors described her recovery as a miracle, and it's one that still hasn't been adequately explained 35 years later. Jean's ordeal began when her car skidded off a remote stretch of road as she was driving home to her parents' house late on the night of December 20th, 1981. This being the 80s, she didn't have a phone to call for help, so Jean started walking to her friend Wally Nelson's, which was just a couple of miles down the road. Unfortunately, Nelson's place was further away than she remembered, and her strength faded as she got to his driveway. She collapsed 15 feet from his door at 1 a.m. Now, when Nelson found her the following day, 6 hours later, he thought she was dead. Her face was ghost-like. He loaded what he could only assume was her body into his car diagonally. Like, she's literally frozen solid. And she looks, there's pictures. It's terrifying. It looks like a toy. It's so, her eyes are open. She has an expression on her face like it's terrifying. Now, when she arrived at the hospital, doctors found that her temperature was too low to register on a thermometer and found that they couldn't do anything intravenously because her skin was too frozen to penetrate with a hypodermic needle.
Yeah.
Her heart was still beating, but it was beating at about 12 beats a minute as opposed to the usual 60 to 100.
Yeah.
And yet, somehow, after thawing her out with warm packs around her body, Jean made a full recovery. She didn't even lose so much as a finger to frostbite. As the doctor told the New York Times later on, I have seen a lot of people frozen like that, but I have never seen a case where major amputation wasn't required. And I had leveled with Jean and her parents and told them that she would probably lose both her legs or her arms, but she is alive and I cannot believe it. She made a full recovery. She's fine.
Oh my Lord. I don't even know that it's like something out of the movies. It's like Mr. Freeze just popped out of the bushes.
Yeah.
It was like, gotcha.
Nice to meet you. Take two, call me in the morning. She was fine. She was so fine. Like, it's crazy. But the pictures
talk about being afraid. Yeah.
Oh my God. It's like her left arm is up and her face, she is a complete popsicle. Like, imagine picking her up. Was she being like super heavy and just popping her into your car? Like, she'd be like a standee. It's quite like, it's not funny, but it's funny, you know.
It is kind of funny.
Totally
I know his name is Wally Nelson, but I just pictured Willie Nelson walking out with a joint and a beard and a banjo and being like, oh, Lordy.
Imagine walking out being like, Jean, what are you doing on the lawn? What are you, Jean?
I wonder how many times she pissed herself to stay warm.
Oh, I don't even know. She would have passed out for sure. She would have been so cold. But she didn't lose any fingers or toes or anything. Like, that's bonkers.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know if she was conscious or what level of consciousness she had when Wally picked her up. And if she was awake the whole time, or if, you know how they say how the body just sort of goes into.
Yeah, sorry, I just had like a whole National Lampoon's thought, like he just popped her on the roof racks and done it. Ah,
Oh Lord.
yes, but yeah, in terms of like going into that survival state, her
Mm.
heart was still beating, but at 12 beats a minute. That's wild.
Yeah. Well, look, maybe Walt Disney will be able to be
Yes, be
revived back in the day.
revived. That's right. Exactly. It makes you think of that. All right. Now, quickly before I leave you, I wanted to give you my pop culture reference of the week. And because we're talking about snow and ice and survival, the one that popped into my brain is none other than The Revenant. Have you seen
Oh,
Dom?
okay. Don't judge me, Kate.
I might.
She
I
has.
might judge you.
I have started it
Okay.
and stopped, and I just think I wasn't in the right frame of mind when I first started it. And I'm like,
Yes.
oh, fuck, I'm not going to enjoy this. I'm ruining what should be and is considered a really great movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to ruin it. So I'm going to just, instead of forcing myself to watch it, I'm going to stop it. And one day I'll go back and watch it. And I
Perfect.
haven't done it.
Okay, so here's my thing about this movie. Its runtime is 2 hours and 36 minutes. That,
Awesome.
for me, is too long. It's too long for me to be interested in a film of this kind of nature. Now, it's based on a true story of a fur trapper by the name of Hugh Glass. If you haven't seen it, go and read. I could read you the whole thing, but it's based on a true story where he, people think that he's dying because he gets attacked by a bear, but he survives, and then the guys abandon him, and then he tries to kill the guys that abandoned him. 2 hours 36 minutes. It's really pretty, but I tried to figure out why I didn't really love it, but then I managed to find some reviews that kind of surmised my thoughts about it. So I'm going to share those with you. One of the reviews said, in favor of non-stop mesmerizing technical achievements, the film fails to be anything other than a series of striking images. So the cinematography is phenom. They won 5 Academy Awards, including Leonardo DiCaprio won his first Academy Award for acting. Cool. Now, another review said that Inarritu, who's the director, is an undeniably talented filmmaker and a good storyteller, but he's developing a nasty habit of becoming insufferably artsy. Now, I've been described in the same way, so I know the feels. Yeah. Insufferably artsy. Finally, one of the last reviews that I saw, which aligned with my thinking, was I admired its ambition, but also found it an endurance test. I was longing for it to be over and so relieved when it was, which, funny enough, my last relationship. That was a review of my last relationship. It was an endurance test, and I was so relieved when it was over. So those are my thoughts. It's stunning. It's beautiful. Put it on in the background. You don't really need to pay attention in sense of, please disagree with me. Please reach out. That's fine. That's my opinion. That's my opinion.
Oh, now, Kate, the burning question I'm sure everyone is wanting to know.
Hit me.
If you were Ernest Shackleton and you had just survived this massive ordeal, 4 different rescue attempts, no thanks, don't need to see the camp, finally got back home, had a cup of tea, and the Prime Minister or the President or whatever called you and said, so, would you have stayed, gone to war, or would you have kept going on the trip if you'd known what had happened? Which would you have done? Stay for the war or go on the trip?
I think I would have gone on the trip.
Yeah.
I think based on reading a little bit about Ernest and how, passionate he was and how this mission was something that took him years to organize. Like, he had to do fundraising. It almost fell through all these times. I would definitely do that because there's a true passion in that. And they were all under the impression that the war was going to last like 4 or 5 months. They thought that that's no problem. So we'll just, march in and get everyone together and get it sorted, and we'll be, that it'll be over by the time we get back. So I think, without enough information, you'd be like, well, if the Prime Minister's saying I can go, Winston Churchill is like, you can go on your sailing trip, then I would.
That was really good. John Lithgow's got nothing on you, Kate.
We will fight them on the beaches.
Oh my God, folks, please welcome
Winston Churchill.
Winston Churchill.
Lizzie Truss is out there giving out Scotch fingers and cups of tea, doll. Pop on out. She'll sort you. She'll sort you, Winston.
No, only half a Scotch finger.
She's conservative. Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Dom, would you do it? I forgot to ask you back. That's rude. Would you go to war or go on an expedition?
Fuck my drag.
We have lost the plot, everybody.
Yeah, of course. I mean, and I don't want to make light of war. War's horrible and terrible, but I'm sure that trip, for all the things that did go wrong, what they did for science, what they did for, exploring and everything is pretty bloody amazing. And if people don't know who Shackleton is, like, go back and do yourself a favor. I know if you're not history buffs or all this sort of old-timey stuff's not your thing, his adventures are stuff of legend, and you should definitely go read as much as possible about it. So I would definitely have gone on the trip. Yeah.
I had no idea who Ernest Shackleton was. I met him for the first time today. I knew about him for the first time today. So if there's one person out there who doesn't know him and wants to, just learn about cool stuff, do it. Go look it up.
Well done, Kate.
What? Thank you. I love you.
We love you. That was an epic, epic, epic tale. You did that to death.
Thank you. Well, not in this case. Nobody died.
I know.
Well, actually, a couple of those guys that were with, old mate from Australia, Douglas. But anyway.
Yeah, a couple of toes were lost. That's it.
All right, everybody, we love you. Love you, love you. And look at our socials for some additional photos and stuff from this episode. And we will speak to you so soon.
See you next week, hopefully feeling better.
Yay. Love yous. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Catherine. Catherine.